Mr. Semenya.
Judge, thank you. Mr. Magaza, by way of illustration, can I invite you to the Minister's Discovery Bundle and invite you to go to page 320. You have the document before you?
Page 320.
320.
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do.
All right. You will see it purports to be a minute of a transitional steering committee of SASA. That's what its heading says, am I right?
I'm not too sure they're reading the same one. This one is SASA Project Risk Register and Maintenance of PMO Resolution. I'm not too sure.
No, I think you've got the wrong document then. The Minister's Discovery Affidavit would have a minute on page 320.
Okay.
Do you have it now?
Yes, I do.
As I say, it on its own language says it's a minute of the Transitional Steering Committee of SASA. Right?
Yeah, it says that.
And present there are SASA officials as well, am I right?
Yes, there are some of them, yeah.
And some of the EXCO members, right?
Yes, some of the EXCO members, yes.
And its business is the work streams reporting to this steering committee, am I right?
I think so.
All right. I don't want to explore too much about it, but there is also, if you go to page 323, you will find at the foot of that page a paragraph 5.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, let's go to paragraph 4.3, which you will find on page 321. You will see then it's minuted that during discussions held with stakeholders, it appeared the overriding opinion was to hand the entire process to the formal banking sector. This option raised concerns in the light of the potential conflict between banking agenda and SASA's social assistance mandate. This aspect and the business rationale had been explored and unpacked in the document. You see that?
Then which number is that?
4.3.
4.3 number?
That's the opening paragraph.
Okay.
There. Yeah. And under paragraph 1 of that 4.3 says the following financial considerations were highlighted. 1, banking charges were correlated for low-income accounts, and it was determined that for the majority of low-income accounts, any interest earned would be absorbed and potentially exceed by banking charges. You see that concern expressed there?
Yes, I see.
As I understand the documents, that was the issue relating to banks, that they might undermine those who are on this lower rank with the bank charges, right?
Yes, it is like that.
Okay. Let's go to something else, which is now the report of the Treasury. It is not in the province of Treasury to say whether work streams are a good idea or a bad idea. I'm right, eh?
Yes, you're right.
So what Treasury is talking about, it is talking about the procurement of the work streams, that its procurement process was irregular. That is what it is pointing to, am I right?
Yes, it is.
It is not questioning the integrity of the work streams at all,
Yes, they never did.
and neither their mandate.
Yes.
Okay. Let us come to your affidavit, and that's probably where we're going to stop it. Do you have your affidavit before you?
Which bundle is that?
It would be black sash bundle, and you'd find it at page 43 of that bundle.
Is this the same one? It's fine.
I'm told it's item 43 and page 693.
693.
Page what, Mr. Semenya? Page?
693. Judge, sorry. Do you have the document?
I do.
All right. I want to draw your attention to paragraph 11 of that affidavit. You'd find further down, paragraph 11. Are you there?
Yes, I do.
There you say these work streams were given a broad mandate to take over the implementation of the project, and SASA was instructed not to interrupt them or delay them.
Yes, I said that.
Yes. And that the work streams must be given complete access is not something objectionable, am I right?
Yeah, it's not.
And in fact, the instruction that please assist the work streams to achieve its purpose, it is a perfectly lawful instruction. Is that right?
It depends how the instruction comes.
Yeah, even if it came from the CEO to say, please give them your cooperation, that would have been perfectly legitimate to say.
Because they were supposed to be reporting to the ex-con CEO. It would be legitimately correct to say that.
Yes. And it is not unlawful for them to report to the minister, am I right?
If an instruction from the minister, it's not unlawful, because
That's
the minister's got the right to instruct
right.
whoever to do whatever they want to do.
That's right. Then you say in that paragraph, the work streams reported directly to the minister and not to SASA. You're raising a question about lines of reporting. You're not questioning the integrity of the work they're doing.
Yes, there was a context to it, yeah.
Then say you, in the last sentence of that paragraph, thus the delay in achieving the deliverables as per the report submitted to court must be seen in this context. That I find a little confusing. Do you want to amplify?
Yeah, the 7 deliverables that we were talking about on the issue there.
And yet we end where we started, that the 7 deliverables promised to the court in the report of 5 November 2015, that SASA would on its own be able to pay these grants came 31 March 2017 was not realizable. I think you came in November and you made that assessment yourself.
Yes, I did.
You also mention with some it is quiet. Maybe you won't share the word with me, but when the minister says, Mr. Magwaza, you can go ahead with your day-to-day functioning, that in itself is not anything that would you describe as dismembering you in your capacity as the CEO, right?
Supposed to be a leader of the organization strategically and otherwise. The minister was treating me like a general manager, saying that the work streams it's like work streams are taking over. I'm not supposed to do anything pertaining to what they are doing. I must just concentrate on the day-to-day running. That's how I took it to be.
I said even with your best volition, you had no intention to stop the work streams from helping SASA achieve its legal mandate. Am I right?
It's true.
And neither was anything the minister was doing that was intended to frustrate SASA's ability to meet its promise to the Constitutional Court. That must be my answer, and that must be correct. Eh?
No, I said there's so many meetings that have been taking place, informal meetings, where the minister was airing her views and her anger on what was happening, and say that we are stopping the work stream from doing what they are supposed to be doing, which is not the case. They were doing things on the side, and SASA was doing some things on the side.
Again, you are inviting me to go there with you. What was SASA doing on the sides so that it can achieve the payment of grants came 31 March 2017?
Maybe between me and you, we confuse the issue, not confuse, maybe we're talking on parallels here, because when I was saying, and I said to you, when I got into SASA, my only concern that I had when I walked in on the 3rd was the payment of social grants by the 31st of March or the 1st of April. Anything that we'll do must go towards that. That includes the work of the technical committee. And remember, when I walked in, I asked the CEO and said to her, have you received the report from the work stream? Which proves the point that I had no problem with the work streams. If the report was there and had the things that I think would use for the 1st of April, we would have used it. And she says that you can't ask me that question because you know that Ms. Mvulane is the one that is dealing with the work streams. Then I call Ms. Mvulane, and Ms. Mvulane, do you have the report that was promised to us within a week or 7 days that you're supposed to get? Do you have that report? She said, Mr. Makwaza, we still don't have it. So this, I've been saying over and over again, I never had a problem with the work streams. The only problem, yeah.
I accept that I'm probing something different. You say SASA was doing something else to that which the work streams were doing. Now I'm trying to establish what else are you saying SASA was doing to achieve the realization of 1 April 2017?
They're exploring the issue of post office, they were exploring the issue of banks, they were exploring so many things that they were exploring.
All those options, you ultimately came to conclude they were not going to happen before 1 April 2017, am I right?
Context again, before I arrived, that's this what I was saying, I'm talking about, that they were exploring those things. When I came, I wanted all those things. What is it that you guys are ready with on the 3rd of November? Nothing was there, and the report was not there, even from the work streams too.
Okay. But there is nothing on the side that SASA was doing for the realization of that which was frustrated by the minister or the work streams. Am I right?
I'm not too sure whether I must repeat myself. And I said before I came in, they did. They were doing something with the post office, exploring the issue of the post office, exploring the issues of the banks before I arrived. I said that.
Okay. The record will speak for itself, but those other solutions are the ones you are mentioning long after the appointment of the work streams.
Can you repeat that again?
The activities of the banks and others and post office and others are ideas that come in November, December, January, long after the establishment of the work streams.
No, I think the record will show itself, like you say, that those things were already on the cards that they were discussing as EXCO before I arrived there. So these ones that I was talking about on the technical committee is the one that we formed at that particular time, and it was agreed upon that 6 options that came about, 2 of them were possible, 1 of them won the likeness of the committee,
Okay.
and that's the one that we push forward of CPS.
If there was another structure that SASA was busy with for the realization of this goal, it is not anything that the minister stopped. Factually correct.
I wouldn't say it's factually correct if the minister was dealing with the issue of work streams on the side, and CEO or acting CEO and the CEO coming in were dealing with some other things on the side.
Those
these
other
were parallel things.
Okay, those on the sides, at no stage did the minister say they must be stopped. Am I right?
I'm not too sure how to answer that anymore because I've been answering that so many times. The minister was involved on the issues of saying that do not disturb what the work streams are doing, carry on with what they're doing on a day-to-day. And the day-to-day running of the organization was talking to us the 1st of April 2017.
Okay, my last question to you. You have nothing in writing by the minister suggesting that what SASA is doing must be stopped in preference of the workstream work.
Which period are we referring to?
At any period before 1 April of 2017.
The minister appointed the work streams and said must report directly to her, and they were not reporting to the work streams, to the EXCO, and they were working only with Mr. Mvulane and not with the EXCO. So in my view, that the minister did have kind of contribution towards what has happened.
You're not aware of the minister stopping the involvement of the CSIR, are you?
No, I'm not.
Or that of the post office, right?
The post office, I am aware because I spoke to her. She said the post office are not ready, they are not capacitated, they are not, she said that to me.
Something about which you did not hold a different view, I hazard to suggest to you.
Which one?
You had no difficulty with her observation that the post office was not...
I had difficulty because we had a workshop with the post office. We had just discussed things with the post office, and the post office said they were ready, and the post office are on record to Coastal Court that they are ready to take over the grants. So I believe that they had, because the technical team from the post office felt that it was possible for them to do something.
I will argue that even when you were the CEO, even in January and even in April, when you wrote what you wrote, you were not able to say that the deadline promised to the Constitutional Court was going to be realizable, right?
But I wrote it after the 1st of April,
That's
that one that you're talking about.
I know
the one
that.
you're referring to is after the 1st of April, so I don't think it's relevant to what you have just asked me.
Okay, maybe I'll show my relevance in argument, but your answer to my question is what? At no stage, SASA on its own, even including the solutions of the bank, would have delivered the social grants came 1 April of 2017.
From the time I walked in, it was not possible.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Judge.
Judge, with your leave, I have some questions for re-examination, about 3 questions.
Okay, because Mr. Horn has indicated he has no questions. So you can proceed, Mr.
Thank you,
Solomon.
Judge. Mr. Mwaza, you were asked about the purpose for which your affidavit had been furnished to the Constitutional Court. Do you recall the question during cross-examination?
Yes, I do.
And you answered that you'd understood that the purpose of the affidavit was limited to dealing with the averments raised by the minister in her affidavit. Is that correct?
It was meant for that, as far as I understood from the
Could you
from
just
the
go
council.
to your affidavit?
Such.
It's at page 699 of the Black Sash bundle. And I just wanted you to read for the record paragraphs 4, 5, and 6 of that affidavit.
Paragraph?
4, 5, and 6. Paragraphs 4, 5, and 6 of your affidavit.
The purpose of this affidavit, by the way of directive made by this court on the 5th of April 2017, I've been given leave to respond to the affidavit of the first respondent, the Minister of Social Development, here named the Minister. I filed this affidavit pursuant to this court's directive. I only wish to deal with aspects raised in the affidavit of the Minister which impact on me and which are, in my respectful submission, incorrect. Accordingly, I confine myself to responding to these aspects only, without burdening this affidavit with serratium or transversal of the minister's affidavit, save where it is necessary to give proper context.
Yes, so there was just a bit of legal speak there at seriatim. Then, thank you. Then it was suggested to you in cross-examination that the question of the minister's resistance to the utilization of the local banks as an option was not dealt with you at all, did not form part of your affidavit. Would you just go to page 706 of the same affidavit and read for the record paragraphs 26, 27, and 28?
26. Immediately upon my taking office, I took steps to engage National Treasury, DSD, and South African Reserve Bank. I was optimistic that a solution could be found in terms of whereof SASSA, with the assistance with other government agencies, would be in a position to pay social grants. The indications of National Treasury, Southern Reserve Bank, was to the effect that this was possible if SASSA were to utilize local banks. Mindful of the fact that the use of local banks is contemplated in the social assistance regulations, I saw no major stumbling block, and hence I put my energies in finding alternative solutions.
And then 28?
In retrospect, it was the minister who was determined that an internal solution will not be found. It then transpired that the minister was against the utilization of local banks and post office.
Thank you. And then just finally, you made mention of your understanding what the CIO had said, not your understanding, your recollection rather, of what the CIO had said, the meeting of the 4th of October 2016, do you recall?
I recall.
And you said you'd seen it in the minutes and you'd referred to it in your evidence in chief. Would you go to the SASSA bundle, page 206? Does Judge have it? Do you have it, Mr. Magwaza? Just,
I do.
I'm not going to ask you to read the last paragraph. I think you've already read that to the record in chief. But just read it to yourself. It's the paragraph that starts with Mr. Mashlangu raised. He was the CIO, was he not?
Yes, he is a CIO.
Just read that to yourself and just tell the inquiry what Mr. Mashlangu was raising here, and was he referring to the work streams?
All this came about when I was not scolding because I had no power, I had no authority over them at that particular time. But I was raising the fact that Expo must remember that they are the ultimate governance body that is running the organization on a day-to-day going all the time. And they can't keep on pointing fingers outside and say that Zodwa is this, Zodwa is that. People need to take charge of their responsibility. And then on this case, I went straight for him and I said, you are the CIO, Mr. Mahlangu. And all the things that is being done with the new issue of the new payment is that it is based on the IT platform. Because it's based on the IT platform, you are supposed to be in the forefront of what is taking place. That's when then Mr. Mahlangu started talking about the issue of that. Like, this is what has been happening. We're not being given a chance of doing what we're supposed to do. And he only got to meet the work streams a week before.
When he refers to the current arrangements, he says he raised concerns. I'm reading the first line. That as an IC person, he was not happy with the current arrangements because his department was not fully involved with the ICT processes. What are the current arrangements that he was referring to?
It was based on what the work streams were doing onto the site.
Yes. I've no further questions. Thank you.
You arrived, you took up the position of CEO, beginning of November 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when you arrived then, what exactly was it that SASSA was doing to achieve its objective, the objective of beating the deadline?
I said, Judge, they had said that they were busy exploring on the issue of the banks and exploring on the issue of the post office as the way to take forward the payment of grants.
Even after your arrival, were they still doing that?
No, after I
Because
arrived,
I thought that exercise they were engaged in prior to your arrival.
yeah, after I arrived, I'm going to repeat, Judge, I had the one-on-one. I was going to have one-on-one on all with everybody, but we'll start with the acting CEO. The first thing I said to her, I said, I need to know what is it that you have done all this time, not all this time, what you have done, or what is it that you have that is going to help us to pay the effective fund? Because my concentration is the payment of grants.
You asked,
I asked,
what is it that you have?
what is it that you have? There was a report, remember, Judge, on the 24th.
No, wait a minute. You asked, what is it that you have?
Yeah.
Did they tell you then what they
The context of it was the report of the work streams, which was supposed to have been given within 7 days from the 24th, and 5 days from the 24th. So I was asking in context of that, because that was supposed to have solutions of the things that we're supposed to have done. Then she said, I do not have, we're still waiting for it from Mrs. Zotam Fulan. Then I stopped the meeting, and I'm not lying when I said that. I stopped the meeting, I said that, let me talk to Zotam Fulan and just check with her if we have received the report. I called her. She came, she said, the report is not yet ready. It was supposed, and I said to her, Zodwa, please make it a point that within 2 or 3 days, we need to have that report, because there is nothing I'll be able to do without knowing what is it that is what we have on hand. It was based on the same thing that the workstream report, which were agreed upon on the 24th, that we're going to use, as far as I'm concerned, at that time when I walked in. I was no longer interested in anything that has happened before. I was interested from the 24th because I had already seen the report. The only thing that was supposed to be looked into was the issue of more options, and let them write, because there was Standard Bank, there was Post Office, there was about 4 or 5 of the organizations that they were supposed to have written stories around them, or due diligence around those organizations, so that we take a decision whether we go with one of them, or if it's possible or it's not possible. But SASSA has got to decide on that. And she said it was not available.
Let me put it different and bluntly, so you could respond to it. When, upon your arrival as the CEO, SASSA had nothing on the table as a plan to beat the deadline, or some other plan, if not to beat the deadline, any other plan.
There was nothing.
That is what I wanted to
There was
know.
nothing.
Is anyone burning to make a follow-up question? No? Thank you. Mr. Magwaza, you are excused.
Thank you, Judge.
Mrs. Yakub, you are calling in Mr. Dango?
Judge,
Oh,
yes.
sorry.
It is Ms. Mayat Bekus, Judge, and with your leave and guidance, we propose to call Mr. Dango. Mr. Dango will need to be sworn in.
Yes.
Please state your full names to the record.
My full name is Zain Dango.
Do you have any objection taking this oath?
Can I take the affirmation, please?
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the whole truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Witness duly sworn in.
Judge, with your leave and guidance, we propose to briefly lead Mr. Dango on 3 main topics. Number 1, his advisory role to the Minister. Number 2, his knowledge of the work streams and the parallel process and its effects. And lastly, to explore the contents of his resignation letter. Judge, where Mr. Dango's evidence is capable of being curtailed by reference to his affidavit, we will do that. So with your leave, Judge, I ask that we refer to the bundle, which are the documents prepared and produced by Mr. Dango, and we turn to page 247. Mr. Dango, are you at page 247?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Dango, this document commences on page 247 up until page 265. What is this document?
It's a supporting affidavit that I made on request from Advocate Kasim, who was Mr. Magwaza's advocate at that time.
Do you confirm that it is your supporting affidavit?
Yes, I do.
May I ask you, before we deal with the contents of your supporting affidavit, are there any aspects that you wish to clarify or correct as far as your affidavit is concerned?
No, I don't.
Mr. Dango, subject to what you're going to say in evidence, do you confirm your knowledge of the contents of your supporting affidavit?
Yes, I do.
Can I ask you to commence by telling this inquiry how you came to be involved in the making of your supporting affidavit?
The affidavit of the first respondent, which is my erstwhile employer, the Minister of Social Development, was brought to my attention at the request of Mr. Magwaza, who was the second respondent. And based on a reading of both affidavits, I considered it necessary to make this affidavit subject to the court, admitting that the affidavit, just to set out the facts as I experienced it. And, yeah.
And what was the purpose of you making this supporting affidavit?
The purpose was to deal with the contents of the minister's affidavit insofar as it related to me, and to bring material facts to the attention of the court concerning the subject matter of the application, because it was in the public interest, I believe. I was a public servant responsible in many ways for the administration of social grants, and deemed it necessary to contribute to an understanding of matters as they stood. Yeah.
Thank you. With your leave, Judge, I would briefly like to contextualize Mr. Dango's role in the Department of Social Services. Mr. Dango, when did you join the Department of Social Development?
I joined the department as the Chief Operating Officer in 2006. Before that, I served as a Chief Director at SASA during the establishment phase from March 2006.
And can you give us a broad overview of your employment history with the Department of Social Development?
So
and I want you to take us briefly from when you started out until your appointment as a special advisor.
So in March 2006, I was employed by the Department of Social Development, seconded to SASA, as SASA was not yet established legally, to assist with the establishment phase of SASA. After the establishment of SASA, I was then asked to serve as the Chief Operating Officer within the department, which included oversight over SASA and the continuing process of its establishment. In 2010, in 2009, after the change of administration with Minister Square exiting, I resigned as Chief Operating Officer, but was then asked to stay on as an advisor to the incoming minister, which was Minister Edna Molewa. I then remained in that position when Minister Edna Molewa was moved, and the Deputy Minister at that stage, which was Batabile Lamini, became Minister. I was asked to stay on as the advisor for that minister as well.
So is it correct to state that you served as a special advisor to two ministers?
Yes, I do.
And you were appointed as a special advisor to Minister Dlamini in 2010?
Yes, I was.
Can you briefly outline your duties as a special advisor to the minister?
The main duties, and these can be found even in my performance agreements, were to provide the minister with policy and political support, to interface on issues regarding policy and policy development with the rest of other arms of government, civil society, and the broader political mandating environment. I assisted the minister extensively in terms of ensuring that the minister was ready for cabinet meetings to making sure that most, the very few exclusions, making notes on cabinet minutes, helping to develop policy pertinent to social development, social assistance in particular, issues around gender-based violence, writing speeches. I think there's very few speeches that the minister wrote that I either did not draft or make comments on. Engaging on request in very important meetings that the minister could not make or felt that I would be better suited to be at. So it was quite an extensive level of assistance, excluding interfering in administration. I was quite strict on that with both ministers that I was formally advisor to, that will stick to the letter of the law, not interfering in the administration.
Mr. Dango, how were these areas of responsibility allocated to you?
We basically would conclude a formal performance agreement at the beginning of every year, and then the minister would request me either verbally or through a chief of staff or through a PA or through somebody senior in her office, directly to me or through my office. Mr. Sipho Shezi, who was the other advisor, and I shared a PA. So most requests for assistance or meetings would be channeled via the chief of staff to her and then relayed to us. Or at times the minister would directly ask me by SMS, via phone call, or directly. Yeah.
As a special advisor, what was the usual format of your advice to the minister?
Most of it was in one-on-one meetings, sitting verbally around questions that arose, and I would advise the minister on certain issues that need to be tackled in a particular way, and at other points I would help draft documents for the minister. So it was both formal and informal.
Thank you. Can you clarify for this inquiry whether your job description as a special advisor includes a duty to give advice to the minister in areas outside of your specified areas that you've described?
The level of duty was quite wide, and at points I had to put boundaries in place, but there were times where advice was asked in areas outside of the specific duties, but I would be able to limit that where I felt it inappropriate.
In what circumstances could you advise the minister and give advice in areas outside of your areas that you have described as your responsibility?
The areas that I would tend to shy away from is in the internal procurement of what happens within SABC. So I could, for example, I could help design what happens from a policy perspective with a new payment model, and I did that running up to the tender in 2012. The tender that was not awarded, I did that as well in terms of being engaged in the discussions of what needs to happen, and I was quite engaged at that time with a number of the CEO, Virginia Peterson, Mr. Magwaza was acting DG, Mr. Sipho Shezi and myself. We did engage extensively on those issues, but when it came to making decisions on procurement, we would recuse ourselves. We would basically limit ourselves to what's in the policy space and strategic space.
Sorry, Mr. Dango, you don't have to switch on off your mic. You can leave it on all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
In circumstances where the minister would request you to give information or advice on an area not in your job description, what would you do in order to give proper advice?
If I didn't stick to the letter of the job descriptions, I think the nature of the relationship between the minister and myself was that I would give advice on political issues as well, and where I felt it inappropriate, I would say that very bluntly to the minister, that was the nature of the relationship, that this is an area where I will not give the advice. And there's many times when I differed with the minister's positions, and I think she averred to that as well in her testimony, that I was not scared of actually challenging the minister when I felt she was wrong in a particular position or a policy issue or anything within the environment of SASSA, social development, or the National Development Agency.
Mr. Dango, in your experience, were you in a position to give unsolicited advice to the minister?
I would not necessarily give unsolicited advice in an area that I was not engaged in. In most cases, the kind of advice I would give that's unsolicited is if, for example, there's a policy on social assistance that I'm engaged in, and I pick up something within in the political environment or within SASSA, I would phone the minister, I would SMS her, I would call for a meeting. But generally, that would be part and parcel of an agreement of where I am engaged. I'm engaged in area X or area Y, and I would then offer my advice to the best of my ability.
And Mr. Dango, you testified that you were employed as a special advisor since 2010. How was your ability to do the job as a special advisor assessed?
For most of those years, until I think the 6 months leading into my resignation, it was a very cordial relationship. We had difficulties, we fought about issues, but up until that period, the assessment was generally very good.
And who would do this assessment?
Well, the format of the assessments would be you, within the government system, you do a self-assessment. The minister, you have a discussion with the minister about it, and if changes are made, she will make them.
And if there was any unhappiness with your work performance, what would be the result?
Well, in my case, it would be the minister telling me she was unhappy. It would come through a form of a letter in the assessment period, through the assessments from human resources. But none of that happened. Yeah.
Now, Mr. Dango, you've heard the evidence of the minister, and she gave evidence that you had the responsibility to raise issues, and specifically relating to the work streams, she said you had the responsibility to raise such issues with her. What is your response to this?
The nature of my relationship with the minister was that she would generally be, myself and Sipho Shezi would be her first port of calls whenever she experienced an area of difficulty or uncertainty. We would be called to meetings around these issues and we would help resolve them. My experience was that when it came to the work streams, the minister did not need or seek my advice because she was getting advice from outside sources, including the leaders, one of the leaders of the work stream. So in this case, my advice was not sought, not by, in my view, not by omission, but by commission.
And what is your response to the minister's evidence that you failed to perform your duties as a special advisor diligently?
I think the minister would be self-testify that my duties as a special advisor to her in a number of issues has been one that she appreciated, and I stated that publicly on many occasions. On this issue, I was again left out of the loop deliberately, that is my belief, because if I had intervened, I would probably have put in views that were contrary to what the minister wanted at a particular point on the work streams issues.
Now, Mr. Dango, I would like you to turn to the Black Sash record at page 66. It is the letter of the 9th of July, 2015. It is the Black Sash record, page 66.
I've
Do
got
you have it?
Yes.
Judge. Now, Mr. Dango, this is a letter of the 9th of July 2015 from the Minister to Ms. Peterson. And this is discussed extensively in this inquiry. When did you have knowledge of this letter?
I saw this letter first in the process of discovery for this inquiry.
I want to ask you this. As a special advisor to the Minister, why did you not have knowledge of this letter?
I cannot answer that. I was not consulted on the letter, the contents thereof, and essentially had no knowledge that the letter was sent in the format that it was.
So as a special advisor, there would be areas that you were not consulted on.
Not very many, I would argue. I think that I would be consulted on many issues. But in this particular case, curiously, my advice was not sought out, as was the case as usual.
When you say as usual, what is that in relation to?
For example, I mean, we had a letter that was sent by the minister to Virginia Peterson asking her to engage with the acting DG in the process of transitioning when she was. That's a big decision. I was consulted on that. I made my views very clear that we could not afford a risk in a space where there's a governance gap, and that we needed to put in place measures. These kind of requests and discussions I was routinely engaged in.
And with respect to the work streams?
With the work streams, I was left out of the loop, including the Ministerial Advisory Committee. I was left out of the loop.
Thank you for mentioning the Ministerial Advisory Committee. I want to discuss the differences between the Ministerial Task Team and the Ministerial Advisory Committee. Can you tell me, when was the Ministerial Task Team established?
The Ministerial Task Team was established in and around February 2014.
And how was the Ministerial Task Team constituted?
And the Ministerial Task Team was constituted by senior members of social development, senior members of SASA, and civil society, including Black Sash, and members of various advice offices that worked with the Black Sash. The Ministerial Advisory Committee was established by the Minister.
Before you go there, what was the mandate of the Ministerial Task Team?
The mandate was primarily to look at ways of dealing with what we eventually called illegal and or immoral, because not all the deductions were illegal, done by financial services providers, some of them linked to the Net One stable of companies, including CPS. So the primary role of the Ministerial Task Team was to look at deductions, but the terms of reference also made mention of looking at progress or getting progress reports in terms of insourcing, what is called the insourcing of SASA's payment function.
Now let's turn to the Ministerial Advisory Committee. How was this constituted?
The Minister constituted the Ministerial Advisory Committee, but on this again, I was not as engaged with by the Minister as I would have been on other matters.
Do you have knowledge when the Ministerial Advisory Committee was constituted?
I think the Ministerial Advisory Committee, if I'm not mistaken, was constituted in 2015.
And is it within your knowledge to know what was the mandate of the Ministerial Advisory Committee?
The mandate of the Ministerial Advisory Committee was specifically to provide a solution for SASA to insource its payment function.
Can you explain what was the role of the Ministerial Task Team versus the role of the Ministerial Advisory Committee in ensuring compliance with the deadline of the 31st of March 2017?
The Ministerial Task Team had very little role in ensuring compliance. The Ministerial Task Team had set itself out in terms of the terms of reference to seek progress reports, and this is particularly important to civil society component of the Ministerial Task Team. And therefore, if you look at the minutes of the Ministerial Task Team, from time to time you'll have SASA officials giving reports, and that included having Ms. Mvulani present at a few of the meetings.
Now, to which of these two committees were you appointed?
The ministerial task team.
And what was your role in the ministerial task team?
In terms of the terms of reference, I was co-chair with Mr. Magwaza, was then, when we set up the ministerial task team, he was still Deputy Director General for Social Security, and he would be my seconder if I'm not able to chair co-chair, and the co-chair would be the CEO of the Black Sash.
And can you just tell the inquiry, what is the ministerial task team, their position in the hierarchy in relation to the ministerial advisory committee?
Ostensibly, it should have quite a high level because it was chaired by senior officials of the department, co-chaired. But de facto, the Ministerial Advisory Committee appeared to have a higher status.
When you say de facto, what do you mean?
In terms of engagement with the minister, engagement with the issues pertaining to the secondary, what I would call the secondary mandate of the MTT, would be getting progress reports from SASA. I'm not talking about work streams, I'm talking from SASA, because we were established in 2014 as the MTT, which meant that we also wanted the progress report on the tender process that was not awarded, and any other aspects that would ensure that there's compliance to pay grants legally, and I emphasize the word legally, by April 2017.
And when you say that that the Ministerial Advisory Committee had a hierarchy, reference was made to a letter that was sent by Black Sash and replied to by Ms. Mvulani. What is the relationship between the three, the Ministerial Advisory Committee, the Ministerial Task Team, and the work streams?
In terms of the secondary mandate of the Ministerial Task Team, we had been asking for numerous updates in terms of progress with respect to insourcing and with respect to meeting a payment deadline of March 2017 legally. We were not, and I'm talking we as the co-chairs of the Ministerial Advisory, were not getting any joy. The civil society component of the Ministerial Task Team then wrote a letter to the Minister, copying myself as the co-chair, but also the Minister's advisor, and copying the acting DG, Mr. Gwaza, in on the letter, asking for a report to be made to the MTT with progress in terms of insourcing. I chaired the meeting when, and I think the exact date is in my affidavit, but I chaired the meeting when Ms. Mvulani's letter was tabled, stating that they were not at that stage ready. It was in and around September 2016, ready to report to the MTT on insourcing, as they still needed to consult with the Minister on issues that were emerging from the work streams.
Mr. Dango, if you can turn to page 252 of your affidavit at paragraph 13, is this the date to which you refer?
Yes, the 26th of September 2016.
Mr. Dango, can you just clarify, in your role as on the ministerial task team and in your role as special advisor to the minister, did you raise any issues of concern with her?
With the minister?
Yes.
Look, informally, definitely. And I raised
Let's talk about formally.
Sure.
And when?
Okay, the first opportunity to do it formally was when I had been agitating for a meeting since the 26th of September with the leader of the work streams, which was Ms. Mvulani, and the work streams themselves. And happily, the minister convened a meeting on the 5th of October. The minister chaired that meeting. It became very apparent to me at that meeting that aside from not being ready, the EXCO of SASA was not involved, and I raised that with the minister.
We will get to that. Just for now, I'm just exploring your roles.
Sure.
But we'll come back to that point. Now, Mr. Dango, your deployment on various committees as a special advisor, in what circumstances could the minister deploy you to committees?
The minister could deploy me to any committee that she felt I needed to be deployed to, or where she felt I could add value.
And how would this deployment occur?
This deployment would occur either in writing or verbally, and normally through a letter or an email from the Chief of Staff as well.
Once you were assigned to a committee, were you required to inform the committee of your deployment?
Yes, I would.
The minister gave evidence that she deployed you to an interface committee. What is this committee?
I don't know what the interface committee is. I was never invited to the interface committee, formally or informally.
The minister also gave evidence that she deployed you to the minister's advisory committee.
Again, I was not formally or informally invited to attend or participate in the ministerial advisory committee.
The minister gave evidence that she deployed you to the workstream committees. What is your response?
Again, I was not formally nor informally, through any of the channels, asked to be part of those processes.
In your perusal of the documents before the inquiry, were you able to find your name on any of those minutes?
No, I could not find it.
What would happen if the minister told you to attend a committee meeting and you disobeyed her instructions?
I'm pretty sure she would be unhappy, especially if it's a pattern and if there were many meetings and I did not attend many meetings without an apology. I'm sure she would have reprimanded me.
How many times were you subjected to disciplinary proceedings when you were employed?
Not once.
As a special advisor to the minister, when could you attend meetings of SASA?
I could only attend meetings on SASA by invitation of the minister, or if there was a particular issue that either the CEO or acting CEOs wanted me to deal with. That would be done in writing through an invitation.
How would SASA be informed of your attendance?
I would confirm or give apologies.
In the event that you were deployed and failed to attend a meeting, how would this be brought to the minister's attention?
It would be brought to the minister's attention by the people chairing the meeting, either the CEO of SASA or anybody who convened this meeting. But it would also be reflected in the minutes. Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question. Can you point to any minute of a ministerial advisory committee or a workstream committee or a SASA committee where you are noted as absent or tendered your apologies?
I've looked through the documents and could not find one.
Now, I want to turn to your knowledge of the work streams and when you started raising this with the minister. And I ask it to you directly. When did you first raise your concerns with the minister about SASA's readiness to engage in the payment process by April 2017?
With the response from Ms. Mvulani on the 26th of September that she was not ready to give us an update, I was alarmed because it was not the first time that such a request was declined. I then immediately sought to engage with Ms. Mvulani around this and asked for a meeting with the workstream leaders. At this point, I was now crossing a line and engaging in, as a special advisor, into areas that were admin related, but the context and the urgency of it required me to do that.
If you turn to page 268 of your bundle, it is Annexure B to the affidavit. When you say you are crossing the line, is this in the context of this letter?
Yes, this is the letter written by the Black Sash. But I did that in the context of chairing the MTT.
Why could you not, as a special advisor, why could you not just raise this issue with the minister?
I did raise these issues with the minister informally, but in an inquiry like this, it amounts to yes. But we had meetings, and often quite difficult meetings, about what we were and what I was hearing in terms of the role the work streams were playing or not playing since their establishment.
And if you could turn to page 270, which is Annexure C of your affidavit. This is a response from Ms. Mvulani. What happened as a result of this response?
Annexure C.
Page 270.
Okay. This is the letter that was tabled. It was asked to be read out at the MTT meeting. I was chairing that particular MTT meeting. I immediately asked for a meeting with Ms. Mvulani directly, and I've also asked for, with a view to getting a report outside of the MTT, because I was now exceptionally concerned about the progress issues, given that we were a few months away from the deadline.
And I'd like us now to turn to the Minister's discovered documents, page 1851, which are the minutes of the 5th of October 2016.
What page is that?
It is page 1851, Judge.
1851.
Yes, Judge.
That must be the further discovery, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Minister's discovered documents. I have it as Minister's discovered documents. Judge, do you have it? Thank you. Now, Mr. Dango, these are the minutes of the 5th of October 2016. Can you describe what transpired at this meeting?
At this meeting, I was happy it was finally taking place, because we were asking for it for quite a long time. I was actually quite surprised that the minister was chairing it, because myself and Sipho Shezi were agitating for this meeting to take place. But the meeting took place, and we got a report from the work streams about the progress they've made, and also included in our concerns was how ready were they to legally take over the payment of grants by April 2017. What I found was very little progress. There was no indication that the work of the work streams would lead us to a solution by April 2017, other than a proposal that CPS be contracted for another 2 years. I then made the suggestion, after first expressing concern that given that CPS's contract was invalid, or declared invalid by the Concord, that extending an invalid contract would not be broken by the court, and that the court would not see a difference between an extension or a new contract. Those issues were part of the discussion. I then also mentioned the fact that beyond the work of the work streams, but it's 2 years since, it was close to 2 years, since the SASA decided not to award a tender, and yet we're sitting in October 2016, a few months away from 2017, and the only solution on the table was we need to extend our engagement with CPS. I mentioned I raised the notion of, in the public sphere, that this could be seen as a self-created delay, which could have legal repercussions. And in fact, once I said that, Mr. Tim Sukazi, who was the leader of the legal work stream, appeared to concur with me and handed me a memorandum from Susanna Cohen and Hani Drake, which essentially, if you look at paragraph, I think 13, and also the summary of the memorandum also raised the issue of a self-created delay that could have legal repercussions. Those are the issues we discussed. My suggestion at that point was that they should go on tender immediately, and that any engagement with CPS would be in the context of that tender, in the phase-in, phase-out component of any new company taking over the process.
Mr. Dango, when you describe this context, are you referring to page 1852 at the foot of the page, where it's headed Minister Meeting Feedback 2, and underneath there is Zane comments, and then it continues to page 1853?
Yes, I am. The minutes are quite redacted, so it doesn't give you a very clear picture of everything that transpired. But essentially what was being presented to us was the notion of SASSA being, the goal of being the paymaster, and the reality of the fact that they would not be the paymaster by 2017. And also, they were using terms such as strategic outsourcing, strategic insourcing, and I questioned whether that is not an outsourced model anyway, with more controls on certain issues. The work stream's response was affirmative, and that's why I suggested they go on tender immediately.
Mr. Dango, on page 1853, at the third line from the top, there is a note that under Zane comments where it said, SASSA created the problem. What does that mean?
When I say SASSA, I mean, I wasn't just limiting myself to the work streams at that point, because you also had the Ministerial Advisory Committee, which morphed into the work streams. And also the leadership of SASSA I was engaging with as well. And I recognized that at that meeting it became clear to me that the executives knew very little, and that's, they can't be excused for that, because they need to assert themselves when that matter arises. But they had more than 2 to 3 years since making a decision not to award a tender and to go in a process of insourcing by April 2017, that the kind of urgency was created by lack of specific action to insource legally.
Now, Mr. Dango, if you return to your affidavit, you deal with this meeting at page 257 at paragraph 24. And at page 258, at the top of page 258, your affidavit reads, at this meeting, Tim Sukazi, the legal workstream leader, appeared to agree with me on the problems related to the lack of a firm plan. What does this mean?
My limited understanding of the legal contracting space would be that if you had said to the Concord that you would develop a firm plan, thus not going the same route with CPS based on the invalid contract, that you would have a firm plan in place. And we've been asking for that firm plan through the MTT for a very long time. It became quite clear to me that in the approach by Mr. Sukazi, that he agreed with the fact that it would be very difficult for the leader of the legal work stream, which was himself, to go to the Constitutional Court and ask for an extension or a new contract with CPS in the absence of a firm plan beyond that period. And you know, the memorandum which I attached, which was given to me by Mr. Sukazi at that meeting, in a brown envelope, he was sitting right next to me, also affirms the fact that if you read, I think, paragraphs 6 down to 13, the memorandum very specifically raises the specter of legal challenges based on a self-created delay.
Mr. Dango, is it your evidence that at 5 October 2016 there was no firm plan?
Yes, it is my contention that there was no firm plan.
Do you have any knowledge of why this is so?
I don't understand why it would not be so. If you look at the time that you had to develop a firm plan, you had the work streams coming in at a very expensive rate. You ostensibly had experts being brought in from outside to complement the expertise from inside, and yet at that point you still had no firm plan. And reading through Cohen, Stubbs, and Drake's document, one finds that they've actually been raising that issue of the firm plan before the meeting of the 5th of October. They were, in their document, they will say, we have said to SASSA that the issue of a firm plan or the lack thereof is a problem. And they raise the fact that the reports that they've been getting obscures rather than provides clarity on the firm plan. And what I saw at that meeting, I had the same impression. I only saw a plan for strategic insourcing, which is an outsourced model, with a rider that CPS contract needed to be extended in whatever way by another 2 years.
Was this the first time you had knowledge of the lack of a firm plan?
Yes. This confirmed to me that why there was lack of urgency or report backs, but this was the first time that I got to know the full picture of the fact that there was a lack of a firm plan in place.
If we look at your affidavit at page 258, at the first paragraph, the last sentence, you state, this document also reaffirmed my concerns about that at least legally the lack of a firm plan could be seen as self-created delay. What do you mean by that?
Self-created delay was something that I feared would be leveled at the minister, the department at SASSA. And it was already venturing into years, but this was already in the political space. But if you did not have a firm plan in place and you argue that your only option was to go with the existing service provider, was already operating under an invalid contract, this would firm the idea that the self-created delay was to ensure that the current service provider continued despite the contract being invalid.
If you, as the minister's special advisor, only knew about this on the 5th of October 2016, how would the minister have had knowledge of this earlier or?
I did not have the advantage of having regular meetings with Ms. Mvulani, as was stated by the minister in her own evidence.
If you could turn to the minister's original bundle on page 748. Just to clarify, Judge, it is the minutes of the 11th of October 2016. Mr. Dango, are you there?
Yeah, yes I am.
Now, I want you to give us the context of your observations which are listed under your name in the first column.
Sure. The first part of the meeting was, and one error that I need to point out is that attendees in this meeting should include Ms. Rapashle Ramokgopa. She attended for she was part and parcel of that meeting for most of the duration. I laid out my concerns emanating from the meeting of the 5th of October. I laid out to Ms. Mvulani and Ms. Ramokgopa the issue of a self-created delay. I laid out the fact that it would be better to go on a tender now rather than wait. I laid out the fact that the term strategic insourcing was essentially just another term for an outsourced model with more control. They agreed. I did put to them that it is possibly the biggest risk to the minister, and that myself and Sipho Shezi was engaging with the minister on this risk, and we did engage with the minister on this risk. But it was also a risk to government given the role that the social assistance program plays in being the government's biggest anti-poverty driver, and essentially again called for a firm plan to be developed as a matter of urgency. In fact, we had asked for a follow-up meeting on the 5th, which then took place on the 22nd.
Now, at the foot of this minute, there is there's comments by Mr. Shezi, and under the heading of political concerns. Were you present in the meeting when Mr. Shezi raised these concerns?
Yes, I was.
And what exactly did he raise?
I think Mr. Shezi raised exactly what I raised, and it reflected earlier, that this is potentially the issue that could make or break the minister's legacy, that this is the biggest risk politically to the minister, and that we needed to deal with it urgently, and to bring into the loop all those that needed to be part and parcel of the decision-making processes. At this meeting, Ms. Ramokgopa explicitly stated to us that she had very little knowledge of the progress of the work streams as the work streams reported directly to the minister. This was said by Ms. Ramokgopa in the presence of Ms. Mvulani.
Mr. Dango, I don't want to go there since Ms. Ramokgopa is not anyway on this minute. So I prefer that we just stick to the parties that were actually present or noted as present. Mr. Dango, on page 750 of that minute, you will see a section under your name. It is in the second block. I specifically want to deal with the solution that was proposed. Can you talk us through that?
Is just to make sure, the one under my name specifically,
Yes,
it says we're heading internal exco. We're in the wrong
no,
documents.
on page 750.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I restated that what we have is not a firm plan, that the work streams need to work on getting a firm plan on the table urgently, and we asked for, on the 5th already, we had asked for a meeting which took place at the Minister's House on the 22nd of the same month of October. The firm plan should have the following elements: control, so I outline all of those, but also to ensure that we get a tender out as soon as possible, so that the phase in, phase out of the current service provider is located within a new tender that is more realistic about what SASSA's capabilities are in terms of taking over the grants legally.
Now, Mr. Dango, in October 2016, in your role as special advisor, you became aware that the work streams were not going to meet the deadline of the 31st of March 2017. And we know that the minister was present in the meeting of the 5th of October 2016, where you raised certain complaints. Yeah. And now we refer to the minutes of the 11th of October, where you raised similar complaints. What did you, as special advisor, do to make sure that the minister was aware that she was not going to meet the deadline?
Well, immediately after this meeting, we had engaged, and I say we, myself and Mr. Sipho Shezi, about the fact that there is no firm plan in place. We outlined the legal difficulties. Again, the nature of our work relationship was that we wouldn't put all of this in writing. At the follow-up meeting of the 22nd of October, which unfortunately is not part of the records of this particular meeting, but it's important. All the work streams were present. It was chaired by the minister. I again told the minister to regularize the reporting requirements, as it was making the life of SASA very, very difficult. And we also outlined the fact that we will be engaging other options. And those options included, we met with MasterCard, we met with Grindrod, we met with a whole range, we met with the Banking Association of South Africa, we met with the Reserve Bank, a whole range of players that could provide us with an emergency solution, because it was in our view that we were in emergency space.
Now, Mr. Dagger, remind us, when were you appointed as the Director General of the department?
The 2nd of November 2016.
And what are the responsibilities of a Director General as opposed to your responsibilities as a special advisor?
As a special advisor, your advice does not have any legal authority. It does not have any legal consequences to you either way. But as the accounting authority of DSD, in relation to the issue at hand specifically, I then became accountable for what is called the big money, the transfer of money to households, which is the actual grant money, the 140 billion that gets to children, people with disabilities, and older persons. SASA's responsibility is the admin component of that, which is how the money gets there, which is the contracting issues with CPS. So my role would be a lot more complicated in the sense that while I don't have oversight or a direct say in terms of the way the act is written over the admin money, I have to work with SASA to ensure that the transfers to households get to people legally. So a lot more administrative role, a lot more legal responsibility than you would have as an advisor.
And in terms of your engagement with the minister?
We laid all of these issues out to the minister. We set up a meeting with the governor of the Reserve Bank. The minister was in attendance. The governor of the Reserve Bank essentially at that point agreed with our suggestion of setting up an intergovernmental team to meet because we were in an emergency situation. We outlined what are the potential areas that could give us a solution by April 27, which would not necessarily be in contravention of what we perceive the Constitutional Court's order of invalidity. The minister agreed to that. That was the first time at that meeting that collectively the then CEO of SASA attended that meeting. Myself, Mr. Sipho Shezi, I do think Ms. Mvulani was at that meeting, and we spoke about the banking environment as a way of ensuring that we can get to a stage where SASA can meet its constitutional obligations legally.
Mr. Dango, this meeting to which you refer, do you recall the date of this meeting?
I'll have to check my records, but it was in October as well, and a subsequent follow-up in November, and numerous meetings between myself and the Director General of National Treasury and the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank afterwards.
Now, Mr. Dang, if we can turn to page 35 of your bundle of documents.
Yes, I'm there.
Judge? Mr. Dango, you will see that this is a report of the report that you gave to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. As you can see, it is dated the 30th of November 2016. Can you please describe what you told the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee?
At this point, we outlined to the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee the views emanating from the government task team, which was only formalized in January, but it started operating already under the leadership of myself and the CEO of SASA and the DG of the National Treasury. And this presentation outlined firstly the fact that from a long-term view, in terms of what the firm plan approach would be to use the open architecture approach through the national payment system. And I must point out that this is not a new view. It's a view that we had already agreed to within government in 2006 as we were negotiating the Comprehensive Social Security document. That document was tabled in December 2012, but that issue 2016, but that issue of engaging through the national payment system and the open architecture approach was not contested. There were other issues of contestation within government in that document, but that was not contested. We then also outlined what the processes were underway in terms of looking at a short-term emergency solution, which included, the extent we could extend through full disclosure, and I stress that through full disclosure to the Concord and asking for the Concord's permission to use that to extend CPS. At this stage, the more nuanced and more approaches of using the banks through Grindrod and other options that formed part of the six were not fully discussed in detail, but the discussions were in process.
What did you inform the Portfolio Committee as to the readiness of SASA to meet the 31st of March 2017 deadline?
We informed we informed the Parliament that in terms of what was presented to the Concord in November 2015, that very few of those deliverables were met, and it was unlikely that they would be met in time to meet the April 2017 deadline in time. We then also suggested that we are in an emergency space and we are engaging on 6 options within government on how to meet the March 2017 deadline. And we also stated that we would need to go to the Concord with a full disclosure, given the fact that very few of the measures presented to the Concord that allowed them to suspend their supervisory function were met.
As at 30 November 2016, was SASA in a position to meet the 31st of March 2017 deadline?
Not without an emergency solution and not without going to the Constitutional Court for a means to meet this through other. SASA would not be the paymaster on a fully insourced model by April 2017 as of this date, and we explained this to Parliament. We also outlined the short-term measures that were necessary, including what legal steps needed to be taken.
Was the Minister present in this meeting?
Yes, the Minister was present in this meeting.
In terms of an emergency solution, what did that entail?
It became clear in this meeting that there was a slight tug of war between the various players from the social development community, which includes myself, the Minister and the CEO of SASA, that the various options, especially the open architecture model, was not being embraced fully by Ms. Umvulani in the manner in which it was presented, and also by the Minister in the comments that she was making.
Now, Mr. Dango, you now know the evidence of the Minister is that she decided of her own accord, without consulting you, to appoint Ms. Mvulani to head the work streams. What does this mean in practice?
Look, it's not uncommon for government departments to appoint external expertise. It's not uncommon for government departments to appoint work stream leaders from inside or from inside or outside of government. So in of itself, that Zodwa Mvulani was transferred from being a executive in the Northwest to 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 head the work streams was not a problem. What is a problem was the suggestion that that work stream reports directly to the minister and not to the minister via EXCO. It may not be illegal, but in terms of governance and communication, it is a serious concern, given the context that we are in, and that SASSA plays such a crucial role in actually meeting, you know, our constitutional duties in terms of social assistance.
Can you tell us why you say this creates such a problem?
The fact that we had no firm plan 2 years after conceding to the court that you after telling the court that you are going to insource based on a set of deliverables. Now, it emerges that this set of deliverables were not going to be met. Work streams are put in place. The Ministerial Advisory Committee is put in place. The entire SASSA was at fault in ensuring that we are not meeting this deadline. And instead of consolidating your oversight role through the CEO, through your EXCO, you depend, through your own instructions, depend on a direct reporting structure to a junior person, a relatively junior person, who then bypasses the SASSA EXCO. And SASSA EXCO, through evidence and through Mr. Magwaza's evidence and others, felt completely left out of the process. I repeat the words of Ms. Ramakgopa, the acting CEO. You are creating a situation where the ability of the institution, and not a few individuals, the ability of the institution to come together, to put their heads together, and come up with a solution was being stymied. And that is a serious issue of governance. If I may, Judge, just in the 3 weeks where we sat the intergovernment, I allocated a 3-week period of intense work by the intergovernment team, which were Deputy Director Generals from the Department of Social Development, the Deputy Governor's team from the Reserve Bank, senior people, including the head of Central Procurement from National Treasury, actually gave us 6 options that we could work with within the period of 3 weeks on their own salaries, which in my view, when reading through the documents of the work streams, I could not get. I could not get the comfort that I got from the work done in 3 weeks than the work done over 5 months, which if we are generous from June up until December, at quite a huge cost. But for me, that is the problem, is if you don't engage the institutions employed to do what they are supposed to do and bring the expertise through the right forums and the right formats, you are creating a governance problem in terms of information and also the possible solutions. And that is why people could infer malfeasance on the side of why this was established.
And when did you first become aware of this operation of this structure?
Of the work streams?
Yes.
Look, I knew that the minister had appointed the work streams. I wasn't consulted, I think that's clear. I was informed that the work streams were in process of being appointed. Again, this is hearsay because there was no formal writing in place. And it came in through the form of complaints from your acting CEO, Ms. Ramakgopa, who felt bullied into signing off on contracts. So I knew that was an issue, and we had raised that. But we also gave the work streams the benefit of the doubt and asked them to report back to us. The 5th of October really hit me that they were nowhere near ready, that very little work was done by the work streams of note. Very little work was done by the work streams that could tell us that by the 1st of April, this will happen legally. 22nd of October, on the 5th of October, we asked them to give us a firm plan. This meeting took place on the 22nd of October at the Minister's house. The Minister chaired it. There was no firm plan in place again. And this for me necessitated strategies that needed to be engaged with to complement the work of the work streams, and at points also on areas where they didn't want us to engage in.
Sorry, the next meeting, was it in November?
22nd of October. 5th of October was the first meeting with the work streams chaired by the Minister. The 11th of October was my meeting, myself and Mr. Shezi meeting with the leader of the work stream, Ms. Mvulani. The 22nd of October was a meeting with the work streams which the Minister chaired at our house.
Thank you. Mr. Dango, you say that the work streams, as I understand you, you did request them to give report backs prior to October.
Yes. Part of the secondary mandate of the ministerial task team was to get report backs from SASA on progress in terms of the insourcing. It's called insourcing. I did not particularly like the word insourcing, but the insourcing approach. At points from 2014 upwards, we'd have different people giving those report backs to Peter Ann Dunkley and others. But when the work streams were appointed, we expected the work streams to do the same and give us report backs. And the reason the Black Sash wrote the letter is that that kind of information was not forthcoming.
We are in your hands for an adjournment.
Indeed, Judge, I think it is an appropriate time to adjourn.
But we'll resume at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.